Welcome back to the show. Today we have Kristin Smedley. She's a rare eye disease advocate, speaker, author, and TEDx speaker. Kristin, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Kev. It's great to talk to you again.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you back on the show. I think what you're doing is actually really inspiring. You've done tons of really cool kind of stuff around, rare eye disease and just being kind of bringing awareness to some of that stuff. But maybe before we get into all that stuff, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
So I am in the Philadelphia area. We're just coming off
Congrats
of my
on the Super Bowl.
Thank you. The city is still going wild, and maybe even by the time this, is out there to the world, it'll still be going wild here in Philadelphia.
Sure.
Yeah. Born and raised here, was gone for a few years to other cities, and love being back in my hometown.
No, that's great. So walk me through a little bit of your career up until kind of what you're doing today, because I think you have a really interesting kind of inspiring story.
Yeah, so I was one of those kids that knew from very early on what I wanted to do with my life, and that was teaching.
Okay.
And I practiced all the time. That was what I wanted to do. Went to college, landed the job, was rocking it as an elementary school teacher, and then I got dealt this diagnosis that I did not plan for with my first child. So when he was diagnosed as blind, that's my Michael, he just turned 18 last week.
Wow.
I had never met a blind person before. Yeah. He's pretty stoked about that. Thinks he's going to go, take on the world with no parents, So,
Sure.
Yeah, good stuff. But, and it's funny because 18 years ago when we got that diagnosis, I did not ever conceive that at 18 years old, he'd be arguing with me on whether he was going to go to the West Coast for college, definitely be a plane ride away, do international leadership things. So it's definitely been an incredible journey.
No, that's great though, right? Because I think obviously some people can kind of turn some of that stuff into a negative and let it really kind of hinder them. But for you and your son, like, they haven't let that slow them down at all.
Yeah. And I think, to be perfectly honest, I started out, I when I got that diagnosis when Michael was 4 months old, I literally hit the floor. Like a pass out kind of hit the floor. And it took me a few years to realize that it was my perception of blindness that was going to hold him back. Because all I perceived it to be was a nightmare.
Sure.
But I didn't know anybody that was blind and successful. And as I started to figure that out and realize that Michael was a happy kid that wasn't letting this impact him at all, I had to switch my perception, and that opened up the world to us.
Sure.
Literally.
So, no, I think that's amazing. So walk us through kind of your work and what you're doing now, because I think you're doing some really interesting, cool stuff.
Oh, thanks. Well, so I went 9 years. I ended up having a second blind child also,
Okay.
and then a third child that's sighted. 9 years as an all-in stay-at-home mom, teaching the boys everything about the world that they couldn't get visually, learned Braille, learned how to use the white cane, did all of that, right? And we were doing pretty darn well. I mean, they were very engrossed in the community, in the public schools. Everything was going well. And then in 2009, a door opened here in Philadelphia for an option for gene therapy for a similar blindness to my boys.
Okay.
So got involved a little bit with a foundation to do some fundraising. Long story short, that foundation, who has been phenomenal for so many eye diseases, just wouldn't let me direct the funding that we were raising to our specific condition, because we found out the gene was CRB1 causing this blindness, wanted to direct the funds. Nowadays, I think you can direct them, but back then, you couldn't.
Okay.
So by 2011, I had talked to a few rock stars in the rare disease community, see how they learned how they went off and started their own mission. And that's when we launched the Curing Retinal Blindness Foundation, the patient organization for CRB1 disease, where we fund research and put out educational stuff for families raising blind kids.
Okay, very cool. So walk me through kind of, because you've done tons of like speaking, and you wrote a book, and you just are working on a podcast and a video series. Like, walk us through kind of all those things and kind of what exactly are you doing in all of those?
So here's the thing. I figured out that the majority, I would say 98% of what I know and what I've done with my boys has come from other moms
Okay.
raising blind kids or kids with challenges or kids with rare diseases.
Sure.
I just don't have enough hours of the day to reinvent any wheels, right? I go to the rock stars that are rocking it and who's doing it in a big way. And then I thought, I learned from all these other moms how to raise my boys well, that they're thriving. They're not just surviving blindness. And how could I sit back and know all of that and have these kids that are incredible and not share what I found out? I mean, my successes, my total failures, all of that with people, because it was, I feel like it's a moral thing that somebody shared with me, so I should share.
Yeah,
but at the same time, I thought, if I'm quiet, then the 70% unemployment rate of blind people will never change. The 30% not graduating high school will never change. All those kinds of things would never change if I'm not going to get out there and be as loud as I can. And one thing I found out I have this gift for is being kind of loud,
Sure.
about things that are of concern to me. And I think that's where the teacher training came in, to be honest. It's like a lesson plan. What does this group need to know? What's the outcome that we need to have happen, and how are we going to get there? So,
no, that's actually really interesting, right? Because I think that makes kind of a lot of sense, and I think you're right. Like, in any industry or kind of community needs somebody like yourself that's willing to say, like, here's kind of what I learned, good and bad, so you don't have to go through it, right? Because it probably took you, tons and tons of hours to figure some of this stuff out, right? And if somebody can benefit from you quickly instead of spending the same amount of time, like, and then you learn stuff from them, and it just kind of constantly snowballs, right?
Yeah, it's excellent.
So let's walk me through kind of the book if people haven't heard of it.
Yeah, so actually what I did was I wished for a long time that when I got that diagnosis that the doctor would have said something other than, I don't know what to tell you. There's no hope for any kind of a cure, so good luck.
Wow.
And I thought, that's not cool. That didn't get me anywhere. That got me 3 years on my couch crying, right?
Sure.
Then I went and found all the people that were succeeding without sight, the Eric Weimayer, the blind mountain climber, Kathy Nimmer, the teacher of the year. Like, I went and found people that were doing this, and mostly I talked to the moms of them first, and then actually met them, or read up on their stories and all. And I thought, all I wanted was a little pamphlet that a retina specialist would hand the family when they have to deliver this horrible news and say, but look, here's a little pamphlet on some stories of there is still possibility for your child. There is a bunch of resources out there to help them thrive.
Sure.
So it started out as a pamphlet, right? And then as I was interviewing the folks that I wanted to highlight as the role models that changed my trajectory, the lessons they were coming out with, some of it, like, it doesn't have anything to do with blindness anymore. It's, yes, blindness is their thing, but blindness goes so far into the background of how they approach the challenge. Half of them were born blind, and the other half went blind in adulthood.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so and the lessons apply all over that. The lessons that were learned were incredible.
Okay. No, that's great. So what's the book called, and where can people get more information about it?
So the book is called Thriving Blind.
Okay.
And you can sign up for the ordering information and the pre-orders at my website, which is KristinSmedley.com. And I'm Kristin with 2 I's.
Okay.
It's an I-N. And actually, right now, they can go on and download the intro chapter. That's the highlight of my journey of why I put the book together. And they'll see all the extremely vulnerable spots where I started. Not necessarily proud of now. My boys think it's hilarious that I started by being so negative, and how far we've come.
No, but I think that's inspirational in itself, right? Because I think the key to success, I think, in any kind of industry is you get knocked down all the time, right? Whether it has nothing, like, doesn't really matter how it happens, right? But it's the people that kind of pick themselves back up time and time again that actually make a real difference in kind of their lives and other people's lives. So I think that's really cool. So walk me through, you were just mentioning that you're doing a podcast. What exactly are you guys doing with that, and how did that come to be?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, now I grew up with a sports background, right?
Okay,
so
sure.
I'm like a diehard sport. So I think I just have this concept of team. I can't do it myself. doesn't get me anywhere. So I'm always looking for team members of what I need to accomplish, right?
Sure.
So last year I end up in this group, this little mastermind that a good friend of mine, Dr. Jen Gardella, put together, hand-picked some folks that she thought would work well together.
Okay.
And then of that group, 4 of us stayed together. Jen had moved up and another girl in the group. Their businesses had grown so much that they actually outgrew us. And then we stayed in this little, I was launching a speaking business and, trying to add some good stuff to my foundation and marketing and learn some new things. So we started this little mastermind. Well, after 1 year of knowing each other, I mean, we've gone from hardly even doing much at all to 3 out of the 4 of us were in the running for the best of our county in our areas and all won. I mean, we were at this red carpet party and we were all having so much success in our businesses that we said, oh my gosh, we need to turn around. People were all coming to us saying, please work with us or please let us work with you. And can you teach us everything you know? And we're like, we're out of this. This is like, we just get enough time on Fridays to have an hour conversation to go over goals and all. We're out of time in the day. How are we going to work with all these people? And then it was about 3 weeks ago that we have this group text that we do constantly with ideas and stuff. And we had this idea for one thing. And after about 2 hours of the group text on a Friday night, the podcast idea came.
Nice.
Because it's like, and from running this kind of stuff, you can reach so many people in a short amount of time, and it's an easy platform. And I listen to podcasts all the time. I'll be cleaning, I'll be running, I'm on the bike, I'm driving. So we thought that's the easiest way for everyone to access what we have. And it's honestly, it's called 4 Chicks Chatting, the number 4.
Okay.
We literally sit around the microphone and chat about what our business challenge was and how we all helped each other get through it. It's pretty cool.
No, that's really great. I think some of that stuff is like, well, at least the episodes that have been the best for me are the ones where they're just like honest conversations with people, right? Yeah. And it sounds like that's basically what you guys are doing. And yeah, you have a topic you're talking about, but it's just kind of like raw, live off the floor, right? And I think people love that. And they might suggest a topic and you guys might dive into a topic, or you guys pre-plan a topic. Or maybe the conversation goes in a totally different direction. And I don't think that's necessarily bad either.
We call it the squirrel brain. We're like, it goes off in a million squirrel directions, and then we round it up at the end, and it's hilarious. And we're 4 extremely different people. I mean, it's like a photographer, another author and speaker, and former pharmaceutical. It's like very different women. And we call it the women-ish because it applies to a lot of different things.
Sure.
But, and super fun, because my thing is, I think because my family was very like, humor was our way of getting through a lot of challenges, and I do that with my kids, that if there's not humor in it, I'm not in. It just doesn't work for me, right?
Sure.
So it just, and we kind of like go all over the place. It's great.
No, that's really cool. So where can people check out the podcast, or when is it going to be live?
So it goes live on March 6th.
Okay.
And they can get information. Right now we're on Facebook at 4 Chicks Chatting, and then Instagram and Twitter also at 4 Chicks Chatting with the number 4. And then the website is coming. There's people that are already trying to sign up to be guests. We don't even have a guest structure yet.
That's awesome.
It's been wild. I mean, 2 weeks. It hasn't even launched yet, and the fun around it has been amazing.
That's really great. So you're also working on a video series, and you have had a really successful, well, you've had a bunch of kind of keynote, speaking topics, but you're working on one that's done kind of really, really well recently. Do you want to maybe cover the video series and the keynote?
Yeah, so they both are built on the same concept of learning to set extraordinary expectations. Because and that evolved from the fact that there are such limited expectations for blind kids in this world. It makes me nuts, because you watch my boys are just typical kids that happen to not see. But the majority of blind kids are not experiencing the things that my kids are, because the perception, the expectation are so minimal. It's heart-wrenching. So then people say, how did you get your kids on these championship baseball teams, and how did you do all these things? And I said, well, I say extraordinary. I tend to use really big, fun words, right? But extraordinary, not in the way of super blind, where we're the overachievers, because believe me, I've got a slacker and an overachiever. I've got both of them, right? Oh my God, the slacker is hilarious and drives the overachiever crazy, But so it's not overachieving. It's what is the ordinary baseline that people think about this challenge that you're looking at, right? Blindness, it's that it's nothing or it's so minimal, you know? And then I say, get extraordinary, go outside the ordinary. Look at yourself, your child, whatever it is, your business. What is outside of everybody's ordinary perception that you want to go achieve? And one of the words that I like is, in terms of extraordinary, is remarkable. Make your journey remarkable, your kids' journey. You know, what are their dreams and how can you get there outside of what other people would consider what they should be doing? So I do that in this keynote where I talk about our journey and how my perception had to change the expectation to be extraordinary, and then the outcomes. I mean, my Michael is now, he's looking to go to either Nashville, LA, remember we're in Philadelphia,
sure,
or Boston for school. I'm like, Philadelphia has the greatest schools, right? He wants to see the world, you know, like experience the world. 18 years ago, there was no way that was going to happen. Sure. You know, they've been on championship teams. They've been involved in all sports. They're on student council. They're achieving just like I would expect them to be if they were sighted.
Yeah, they're basically living like a normal kind of teenage life, right? Like, yeah, I think that's the thing that I really kind of wanted to stress in this kind of episode with you is whatever kind of challenges that, you know, people of kind of all ages, whether it's themselves or their kids or family members or friends, that, you know, your story of kind of what you've done is like it doesn't really matter what the issue is, right? Like they've lived totally normal. And you touched on it on the radio show, but I really want to kind of mention it again is like your blind son played baseball and they won a championship. And like when you first mentioned that to me, I was kind of like, how does that kind of work? So for people that don't really understand how, like, walk us through how you got them on the team and kind of how they actually play baseball. Because I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, and most people do because it seems like an oxymoron. Ain't going to happen, right? Which is what I would have thought. So, and it really is a testament to inclusion and adaptation. And I think that everyone in their life, if they would wake up in the morning and say, if something comes at me, how can I adapt? Yeah. How can I pivot? You know, and it's a whole testament to that. So Michael had been in a blind baseball league in the city where it's slightly different, where they only have two bases and they buzz, and then there's a beeping ball, that kind of thing. Okay. So he learned the mechanics of the game. And we're also a big Philadelphia sports family, so there was a lot of watching the Phillies and all that. Now you have to understand, too, at 9 years old now, Michael's been going into the city to learn baseball and play, and he was so good that the older kids couldn't stand when, you know, this little 7-year-old would come up. They would get mad, right? These blind kids were so mad because he was good. He's also in the regular public school. So we have him so in inclusion and right in everyday life. Well, he's sitting at recess and lunch, and all these kids are now arguing about whose team is better than whose in the Little League, which refs or umps sucked and which ones are good, you know. And Michael's like, nobody knows about my team. Nobody plays down in the city like I do, you know. I'm like, all these kids want to be on travel teams and go to the city, and my kid is saying, I want to be in the neighborhood and play with these kids.
Sure.
So I go to the registration, and God love the commissioner. He looked at me, and I said, Michael wants to play. Michael had his cane in his hand, you know, and he said, we do have the Miracle League, which is a special needs league. And I said, he wants to volunteer for that league, but he wants to play in the regular league. Can you find a space for him? I'll be there. I'll help. His dad will help. And they did find an incredible coach for him that was patient, taught him the game, taught the other kids. And what happened was, so the mechanics of it is, Michael would hit off a tee, and that was a hard thing. I mean, think about a 9-year-old boy. They were just coming out of there was no tees anymore at 9 years old. Right. So he's like, I'm not hitting off a tee. I want to swing. I said, well, if you're going to swing, you only get 3 strikes like everybody else. So if you're going to chance that and get out every single time, that doesn't help your team. If we can adapt it and you hit off a tee and you stand a chance of getting on base, what do you want to do? So, of course, he chooses the tee begrudgingly. And then I only let him play the outfield because the infield was going to be too, you know, dangerous. So in the outfield, he played with another guy. The guy would field the ball, give it to Michael, and the whole town learned to just shut up when Michael had the ball because one voice could call him, and that's where he would throw the ball to. So if the play was at second, somebody stood on that base, called his name, and he could throw it to second. So I'll tell you how that it worked so well that Michael led the team in RBIs.
Wow.
2 of his seasons. And then Mitch started 3 years later, and 3 years apart, they were on the same Orange Mets team, went to the championship and won.
That's really cool. Yeah, see, like, I think that's really, I'm glad that, like, you cover this stuff, right, and openly talk about it, because I think it's really inspiring for people, and hopefully listening, that they just kind of figure out how to make it work for them in whatever case, right? Like, and I think even for people that, you know, don't have any, like, we always use excuses, like something is an excuse to not do something, right, or chase something, right?
Yeah.
And it's like everybody's got different kind of obstacles, right? Some harder than others, and I think some people are dealt a better hand of cards than other people, but it's kind of how you play those cards and how you kind of work with people and kind of figure out new ways to approach and kind of overcome some of those challenges, right? And sometimes it's not easy, and sometimes it takes a period of time, but I think, like, your story's inspiring, you know, with the book and the series and the podcast, and, you know, you've done tons of talking and whatnot, and I wish we kind of had more time to dive a little bit deeper into some of this stuff, but let's close the show with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself and kind of all the stuff you mentioned throughout the episode.
Yeah, so I talked about my website, which is where's the hub of everything I do at KristinSmedley.com. But the video series on setting extraordinary expectations is on Facebook.com/thrivingblind. And that's where I really I'll give like a 5-minute, here's how my boys did baseball.
Sure.
Here's how my Mitchell was on a championship soccer team, right? Here's how we did this. Here was our epic fails. I've done episodes on that when we tried to do something, it was a mess, right? So that's where they can see all those little snippets. And then I'm also on Twitter and Instagram.
Perfect. Well, Kristin, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
Hey, thanks so much. It was great being here. Have a good one.
Thanks. Bye.